My early life, I was always a very temperamental person, angry most of the time. And in the military, I got more angry because the different circumstances. I was married, and I had a son, and I've always find justification for any action that I took, and I didn't. If somebody didn't agree with me, that person was out. I didn't continue to associate with it or whatever. And sometimes fights happen, and but I took the cake that one day that anger was having difficulties, financial difficulties, and in the military always move you without very short notice. I was in a school in Virginia. My family was in Germany, and nobody told me that my wife was in the hospital. Nobody from my unit called me. Nobody could tell me anything. And when I got back and I found all this up, I definitely got very upset. And somebody innocent ended up paying for my when I took all my anger in this person, and I shot him, and this person died. So I went to a court martial, and I was sentenced to life in prison. When I went to prison, I went to Fort Leavenworth Disciplinary Barracks, which is the military portion of the federal prison. And when I got in there, I went with a chip on my shoulder saying that I wasn't going to take anything from anyone, guards or inmates. After my 30 days observation, somebody talked to me about how I'm going to do with my time, how I have a choice. Either sit in front of the TV all day, play cards, or find a class that I could take or learn something. And that's why my story went from there. My behaviors, I was very disciplined. Discipline was very important to me. And part of my discipline was like a strict military type. And when I give an order, I expect it to be carried out. When I went to prison, I didn't change my routine because military prison is a very disciplined environment. You have to have respect, for people of authority and everything else, and if not, you pay the price. Day to day at prison before Christian Science was just another day in the military. Got up early, have breakfast early, and do whatever jobs was available that day for the incarcerated people, and just follow schedule. The only difference is that you didn't make the decision what time you're going to eat. They tell you what time you're going to eat, and you march everywhere. So that part in there was no actually an imposition because it was part of the military life. I grew up in Argentina as a Catholic. I was Catholic from my early days, and but I never felt comfortable with it because Catholic religion has many rituals, and I never felt comfortable talking to another man about my sins. I always wondered, why can't I talk to God myself, talk direct to God? So there was something that I always was searching. When I was in the service, I wanted my son to attend church, so I tried other religions, but they all had rituals, so I still wasn't comfortable, but at least my son was attending church. When I went to prison, I got to Fort Leavenworth, and segregation, the fellow in the cell beside me, he was in segregation because of disciplinary reasons, but he received the Christian Science monitor every day. And they were supposed to to do contraband in prison, but he always, when he finished, he passed me the paper for me to read. Because when you're in observation as a new arrival, you're not allowed to read anything but the rule book from the prison. And so I read the paper, and keep an eye for the guards coming in. I hide it, but I kept reading the paper. And the last page, or the page before last, there was this daily devotion page that I always started debating with it because I didn't agree with it. I never heard of Christian Science before, and so it was very challenging for me to read that page, but I was curious. And I said, no, that cannot be that way. It's impossible. But the fellow next to my cell, and he told me about, he attended the service of Christian Science, and he was not a Christian Scientist, but he'd give me a little bit of information, and I asked request to see the Christian Science chaplain in the prison. The colonel that was in charge of the chapel, and he came in to see me, and he explained to me that they had a Christian Science chaplain assigned to the prison. There were volunteers coming in twice a week, and he will tell one of them, they will call him, it's going to call the church and let him know to come in early to talk to me. The day they came in was Tuesday evening, instead of the Wednesday service, and they come in Sunday night to do the service. And so I couldn't have anything to write, and I made a list by asking the guard to give me a piece of paper and a pencil. And so I wrote questions to ask him. And when this person showed up, he told me that he was a chaplain from the Kansas side of the house and there. And I was so impressed that he answered all my questions without me asking him any, just by telling me what Christian Science was all about. Once the interview was getting over, he invited me to go to the Wednesday meeting or Sunday meeting once I went to population. And so I did that. And when I went to population, I got in there on a Tuesday morning. And when they called church call in the evening, I signed up for it, and I went, and they told me they met in the library. So when I entered in there, there were about 8 people in there. 3 with them, they were officers, and the rest enlisted. And the chaplain was not there yet. So they welcomed me to the group, and they explained to me a little bit about Christian Science. So I was getting little pieces everywhere, but I was still not convinced yet. So after the Tuesday night service and the testimonies those guys gave, and that was very impressive to me. And then after that, we talked a little bit, and they told me about some more about Christian Science. When I started going to the service, Sunday service, after a few services, the chaplain brought me Science and Health, Wiki to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy, and the King James Version of the Bible. And I started reading the book, and many times I put it away because I didn't agree with it. And so I read the Bible. But I always came back to the book. Always. Doesn't matter how disagreeable I was with it, I always came back. And as I was learning about what Christian Science was all about, then I started demonstrating, with the small things, like a flu or I got hurt or something in the recreation field. And so I started demonstrating, and it worked, and that impressed me, so I kept going. But what attracted me the most to Christian Science was there was no rituals. And that is what I was looking for. And I had a direct line to God. I did not have to go through another person to tell him what I did wrong and ask for his judgment and what the punishment was going to be. that is one of the things that got me. And that was in 1987. By 1989, I was already hooked with Christian Science. I did everything in the Christian Science way. I started getting adjusted. It became part of me. I started seeing people different. Not that I agree with the reasons that they were there, whatever was the reason. I started seeing men as the image of God, and not for the crime, because as many know, the prison community has a statue, a level the most violent crime goes on top, and the most evil crimes goes on the bottom. I did started to change that and seeing people different, and I noticed how my life was starting to change. I didn't get angry as much as I used to, and eventually disappear. When I was in there, one thing I hated was people that molested children. But then I learned not to hate it, but to tolerate, and then to change it, because I completely eliminated the reason, whatever was the reason, and trying to treat people in a different way. And people starting to notice that. And they always saw me reading the books in my time off. People starting to notice that and asking questions, and that I responded by inviting them to the service and when they came in, and many of them did, and some stayed with it, and other ones they went to other services because they felt like they weren't doing nothing. They was just sitting there listening. I think the Christian Science challenges at the beginning were many, and mostly was because they were not understood. It was not part of my understanding at that time.